Hey guys, welcome back to Ancient Amnesia Podcast. I'm Josh, and this is Dave.
Hey, y'all.
And tonight we have a special guest, Sven Blackheart. He is a local Austin illusionist and magician, also a friend of ours. He's also a admin to the Ancient Amnesia discussion group, so he's been helping kind of build these discussions. A brilliant artist, a brilliant mind, a person we've been really trying to get into the show for a long time now. Because of his professional experience and also his brilliancy, we wanted to ask him and delve into the mysterious and dark and crazy, misunderstood world of magic, and figure out what in the hell magic is. What do we know about magic? And everybody, I think, has a different definition of what magic might be. So we're going to take a really deep dive, like Mariana Trench style dive, into this kind of world. And there's no person better that I know in my personal life than Sven to actually dive into this. So first off, we want to ask Sven, what got you into becoming a magician or an illusionist, and what is your definition of magic?
How's it going, guys? Thanks for having me. Hey. So getting into magic started when I was 6 or 7. I grew up in a super strict and extremely religious home, and my parents made the mistake of taking me to a place called Magic Island in Houston. I think it's actually about to open back up, and I saw my first magic show. It was a whole building dedicated to illusion shows. There's palm reading, fortune telling, and I was just incensed as a kid. I also ran across a book in that same time period. I got it with me. Strange Stories and Amazing Facts. And it's got various stories about weird things. And ever since then, I've just been a huge freak about it, I guess. Magic to me would be having an effect on reality just from your being, I suppose. Whether that be, illusions or affecting something actually.
Right. So, by the way, who authors that book that you showed?
Who is this author?
So the world can join in on that fun, because that doesn't look like a book. When I call books like that, I call them tomes.
Yeah.
When you see a book that you can knock someone out with, then you know that it's probably that's worthy. It's like a Manly P. Hall type book.
That's
there.
Massive. That's like Blavatsky Unveiled. Isis Unveiled.
Yeah. Right. Secret teaching style.
Yep. Yeah, this was definitely finding a magic tome for me as a kid. I want to say it's multiple authors because it's
okay. So it's a compilation.
Authors, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, that's awesome, and I've seen some of your stuff. It's amazing, and one thing about you that I think this may go with some magicians. You can tell me you're in the network of these artists, but they it's not more about something that they do. It's something that and it's something that you embody as a part of yourself. And so there's probably a deeper connection to what you call interacting with people, making them see a certain reality or superimposing a certain reality on these people that is very personal to you in a lot of different ways. So you've chosen to become a magician and more than just on the stage. This is something that you see in life. When you look into the world, where do you find magic? Where do you see magic in the world as you see it?
I don't want to sound trite and say everywhere, but most places I see magic being used, whether people realize it or not. A daily mantra you tell yourself can be magic in itself, I see magic in advertisement. That's definitely symbology. That's definitely using specific colors to affect people. It's literally everywhere, and we use it every day.
So people use it for good or bad. It's just basically like you hear, the good cop, bad cop, good versus evil. I guess it's a tool. It's like someone who could use a hammer to build a house, or they could also use a hammer to, beat somebody's brains in. So yeah, that's what you think is. A lot of people probably define magic as being good, or bad. But they don't realize it's probably inherent in everything. It's just there's no polarization at all to it.
Yeah.
And Sven, what would you call the difference between, in your opinion, what is, we hear white magic, dark magic. What's the difference of white magic and dark magic?
Yeah.
What do you feel like, how does that fit into um, just a magician or an illusionist kind of platform? Is there something that's going on there that's a little more esoteric that you're putting into your art? Is it driven towards dark or white? And what's the difference between those two? Do you have an opinion on that?
I definitely think I try to put more, I guess, what would be white magic into mine. There's definitely a separation between the two, and it's all about, you know, the intention you have in what you're doing, what you're, I guess, casting. If you have negative intention, it's going to come out as, you know, a darker black. If you have good intention, like entertaining people via illusions, I don't see anything inherently evil or dark about that.
I like that. Yeah, because the shows, you know, the magic that I'm familiar with, you know, besides like David Copperfield and all that kind of stuff, were buskers at Pier 60 in Clearwater Beach. And these guys would just come out of nowhere, and they were real quiet, and they would just put a little table up. And you could just tell that, you know, a lot of them had painful existences. You know, they'd been through a lot, and they were making, you know, maybe $100 a night on a good night. And they would put on show after show and do tricks and do whatever it took. They'd adapt to the crowd. And that's where I got a real great, you know, look at what people really go through to do it, you know, to enjoy doing it and doing it for people. And that's so when I meet guys like you, it's like, you know, I know you're sharing that with people and you get something out of that. And that's awesome, man. You know, and like you said, the white magic, it's for everybody. You know, you're not hanging out with people that are real negative. So yeah, I could definitely see Sven doing some real entertaining stuff, and, you know, maybe coming on here and having a segment where we have him do some of his coolest, you know, illusions or tricks or whatever you call them, I guess.
Yeah, maybe we can get him to get in full costume on the next show there. I was actually kind of hoping that he'd show up, but he's like, awesome,
he's awesome.
Sven was like, I'm setting up. I'm like, oh God, maybe he's got his costume on. I'm so excited.
Cool, man, that is way cooler than these you know, other guys that are, you know, I'm a pirate, you know, and all this. It's like you really get into it, man, with the eyes, and you got the lighting, and yeah, man, yeah, that's real cool.
and what you were talking about, like white magic and dark magic, I think that what I guess I would translate, you can tell me if this connects with you, but is that you're trying to inspire people into something more positive. You're trying to inspire them into realizing that the world is more than it may seem. And that's kind of, I think, what I would say is white magic to do, is trying to make people think more than they do, right? More, they realize the universe is maybe something more than they thought it was, or inspire them to think beyond what they think. And that, I think that would be what I would call where the white magic might go, as opposed to dark magic being more as to show you how the world is full of evil and hate and it's all going to shit. So that might be something that I kind of look at and I say, well, there's a dark side, there's a light side. And we're going to get into these more esoteric translations of magic. But here at Ancient Amnesia, what I wanted to do is I wanted to at least give us a brief synopsis of where magic started. And we're going to start there, and then we're going to just kind of let it breathe, because Sven's incredibly intelligent on a lot of this stuff. We want to get a lot of different perspectives on what magic is. I found a really, really cool kind of breakdown on the middleages.net that is a breakdown of the history of magic. And I'm just going to read this for the audience. The belief in magic and magical powers dates back to the earliest recorded history. In Egypt, for example, large number of magical papyri in Greek, Coptic, and Demotic have been recovered. These sources contain early instances of much of the magical lore that later became part of the Western cultural expectations. So some of the things that we had was magic words, said to have power and command the spirits, the use of wands and ritual tools, the use of magic circles to defend the magicians against spirits, and the use of mysterious symbols and sigils that were thought to be useful to invoke other spirits. So this is kind of the history of where this started in Mesopotamia. We know they found scrolls from 700 BC that are inscribing magical rituals and creating kind of dolls and effigies that represent people in the medieval times, the authors that were under control of the church confined their magic to compilations of wonder lore and collections of spells. I don't know if you know who this is,
Those were
Sven, but
called
Albertus
sacraments, Josh. They were called sacraments.
Sacraments.
Yeah,
And do you know
science,
who
science of the
do you know who
sacraments.
Albertus Magnus is?
The name sounds familiar, but not off
Yeah.
the top of my head.
And so apparently he was credited rightly or wrongly with a number of such compilations, and specifically Christianized varieties of magic were devised at this period. So in the Middle Ages, we had the cult of relics as objects, not only veneration but also supernatural power arose from these things.
Well, who
And you know,
this? That was the Magi. You know, they were this. You know, they were part of it. You know, clerics.
right, right. So this is the history of where the stuff come from, and we realize we know that in history we have, you know, and even today, you know, we hold things kind of magical. We have photographs are a good example. You see a photograph of your grandpa or something, it's got a magic to it. It's got this quality. It's about remembrance. It's a snapshot in time. It's like a crystallized memory that you can look at. It could be objects that were given to you by people that hold power, or crystals that you may buy that you feel like help you in certain times. So magic to me, in the ancient world, I think what we're doing today is we're realizing that it is true, and what's happening is that the mechanic of consciousness is actually superimposing onto reality, and it's working. Just like kind of the what is it called, the whenever you do a placebo, right? The placebo effect is kind of magical, right? Because people are believing something, and it's actually making it true. So what's happening is that you are forcing that reality to become true because you believe in it so. And so in doing so, kind of a magic thing appears. And I think that that's what the ancients were doing. They were kind of using geometry, geometrics, geopositioning, crystals.
Well, Sven, tell me this, Sven. You know, what do you think? Years ago, millennia ago, people weren't as educated, right? So, you know, as people have grown to become more intelligent and learn more, and the Industrial Revolution, and you know, science has just taken off. Do you think that magic back then was like more simplistic and more towards like the laity or the people who are just you know, the downtrodden serfs, as opposed to now where, you know, everybody's got the internet and a lot of intelligence about a lot of different things if they want to go out there and grab it? Has magic changed? Has it become more complex and you know, more difficult to fool or please someone, you know, based on doing magic now, since as it was probably back then, and they'd light a fire, people would just freak out. Whoa, you know, whoa, look at that. So, I mean, you know, what are they doing now to make it more complex, you know, because people are really, you know, they're thinking that way, you know, so it must be really difficult to come up with new tricks and stuff like that too. Yeah.
See, like illusionary magic hasn't really changed a whole lot since the turn of the century, when it got really big, and a lot of the same techniques and principles and, you know, specific tricks even have been rewritten and redone numerous times from now to then. I think it's kind of stereotypical to think that we're any more educated or enlightened than we would have been previously. Magic's definitely changed, but as far as illusions, it's modernized, but it's the same techniques, because you're doing the same kinds of things on people. People perceive through their five senses, and some say six, and the principles of illusionary magic are all based around those.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, because, you know, I'm thinking that, you know, you made a good point there. So maybe back then it was more complex than it is now. You know, maybe people are more distracted now and easier to, you know, fool or trick. But, you know, back then, maybe like you said, maybe they were more in touch with nature, and, you know, we would like to think that we're more intelligent now, but maybe they had a better handle on it back then. So maybe I was backwards.
Is I think that what we're experiencing today is that there was a lot of things they understood in the ancient past that we lost and forgot. And as we've modernized, we've actually lost some of the power that we had, and some of the actual reality of magic working in ways that we have yet to understand, that we're kind of quantum physics and maybe this new science is kind of leading towards understanding. You know, I've always had a saying that the magic of today is the science of tomorrow.
Mm.
And I think that, people today, if you went back 200 years ago and you showed them a cell phone, that's magic to them, and so this idea of actually technology advancing being kind of magical, but then also in this modern world, some of these kind of rituals that they were doing had power to them, and they had effect that we still don't. Now that we've been in the scientific kind of reductionist view, materialistic view for so long, we've lost the respect for, something as simple as prayer, or something that could be considered magical today that could be considered more like science back in the day.
Well, the Vatican is definitely staying right in tune with all that.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on ancient magic in terms of what they were doing it for? What do you think the ancients were using magic for? These things, like I just read, these kind of totems and tools and things that they were using. What is your idea on that?
Well, I definitely think it's an important point that every culture that can trace themselves back has a form of magic. I don't think it's a coincidence that we're so focused on stuff like that. There's definitely more out there than is commonly assumed. We find that out every day. People who don't look into these things, I feel like, walk around with the assumption of they already know everything because somebody else already knows it, or they already know things because someone else has already read it, and that's not the truth of the matter at all.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, people aren't actually taking individual responsibility on their own knowledge. Yeah. How much of your knowledge is stuff that you actually discovered, or stuff that you are regurgitating or taking for granted from someone else?
Mm.
So
pride in that. That makes sense, though, Sven. There's a certain pride in having that knowledge and knowing that you have combed and sifted through it.
Mm-hmm.
for the good parts,
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there magic in the term magic? To me, is so open-ended that I think that it's kind of hard to actually nail down. So when we talk about magic, would you consider something like psychical phenomena magic to you, Sven? Where does magic kind of begin and end in your mind, in terms of, like when we say, I thought of someone, they called me, is that magic? What do we call that? Stuff that science has yet to explain. Is this phenomena something that we can use like magic? What do you think about that?
I would definitely consider that magic. I think there's definite possibility that psychic phenomena is an actual thing. I've dabbled in it, of course, being interested in stuff like this. I don't know where magic would start or stop for me personally. Existence itself is a magic. And consciousness itself is a weird form of magic. Like, where do we derive our consciousness from?
Right. That's kind of
is it all in the brain, or
it's everywhere, man. It's all out there. And we're just inductors. We receive frequencies from certain fields and electromagnetic fields, and influences from celestial bodies and influences from gravitational fields that just and that they alter your genetics to a degree, like tuning an antenna. Your DNA is an antenna that receives that information. And it's out there, man, and it's electrically based in nature, but it's magic because of the fact that it's alive while it's doing its science. It's both, and that's kind of what I think is magic. I really feel that some of the forces that science has taken over and tried to explain, if they would just open up just a little bit, and understand the differences between just rigid ideas and ideologies, and over here you're flexible because you saw something happen once that you can't explain, and then you fight your whole life to try to get that back, and it's almost like a spell or a trick, that you just you live your life to get back. And I see it as being the combination of nature and science and empirical evidence and all that. That's magic. When it can all come together, it's like a perfect poof, and everybody in the audience is just freaking out, like, wow, what just happened?
Right. No, Sven described magic in his introduction with that it's an influence. It's a way of influencing someone. And so what you're talking about, Dave, that kind of ties in that things are influencing us. And with the magic is really where we don't know how they're doing that. It's the mystery of how these forces are working, and that spell that they're putting us under, right? Because that would be kind of how that's working in our lives. Like, why are we all of a sudden, I mean, the moon drives moods, and
what do
like
they,
you said, celestial bodies, we're in this galaxy.
You know, where'd that word come from? Spell. I mean, it just, Sven, I mean, I mean, it's like,
Oh, I don't know that one.
yeah, I'm like, I mean, is it like, who chose that word? Because it is kind of, you can stop and eat for a spell.
Well, that ties into the word spell a word, right?
Yeah,
So
I mean, yeah.
words obviously are magical, right? They have influence over us. So I like Sven's I like Sven's description of that, because I think it's a really good thing to kind of lock into, anything that has influence under you, right? Because that would be the illusion. And that would also be the way that you are then spellbound by that object, whatever it is. So
Spellbound, right? Yep.
yeah, and so that's really, really good, because anything that we don't understand that has influences over us seem like magic. And we have lucid dreams, we don't understand them, they freak us out. We don't know how to interpret dreams to a large degree. That's an entire kind of ability that we have. We don't actually exercise on a daily basis, and ancient cultures have done that.
Sven, what do you think about dreams? I mean, I'm sure you got a killer opinion. What are dreams? I mean, to you, what is going on there?
I definitely think there's some higher vibrational consciousness work going on during dreaming. It ties a lot into like astral projection as well. And I've messed around with that accidentally a few times. Yeah, I definitely think it's a reflection of things that are going on in your life as you know it, reflection of influences that could be coming to you from who knows where.
Yep, definitely. I agree. I've told Josh before, it's like I have these dreams where it's like I'm just going and living someone else's life for 6 hours, and it's realistic, and stuff happens in my dreams that are like actual problems, and I solve problems in my dreams. And then the next day I'll be working on something, and because I work on cars and stuff all the time, and I'll be like, oh, I had an epiphany, and I remember this from my dream, and it's happened to me numerous times. And like remote viewing, have you ever like looked into remote viewing or any of that stuff? Or
yeah, a little bit, yeah.
What do you think of that? I mean, does that resonate with you? Or?
I mean, it resonates with enough people that tax money went to investigating it in the U.S.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was a government program. I mean, it was not something. The government military is not going to spend millions on something that doesn't exist, right?
Yeah. Well,
but
I've done the.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think what we're dealing with here is that we are
It's a trip.
Yeah, there's actually a school here in Austin, a remote viewing school here, because
really?
I was into it, and I was, I was reading a lot of Ingo Swann, listening to him on Coast to Coast and all that, and I got into all that, and it tied into the whole Montauk Project stuff and the stuff they were doing in that in that particular program, and then Philadelphia Experiment, and all these other things.
Philadelphia Experiment would be one coming to mind.
But just kind of
the ground about that.
Right. Yeah, we will. Yeah, but just going back to the idea that we are that consciousness itself, as Sven was saying, is magical. I mean, and when we look at classical physicists, like Bohr and Max Planck and Pauli and all these guys that were really investigating the nature and the fabric of the universe, and they said there's no bottom to this. Like, we can never find a bottom. All we have to assume is that there is some kind of matrix of intelligence that's kind of manifesting this reality, and all we can see.
All right.
and so we have this kind of like we have this kind of like this waveform stuff that we see that's popping in and out, but we don't really know where it's coming from. And I think the hard thing for people to do is to kind of bridge the gap between science as we see it from the material end and science that goes into the non-material, which is about 80-90% of reality is in the non-material form and not in the material form.
You mentioned a different appearance because of the way the light hits it, or a different spectrum of light hitting a mass, or is there actually a physical difference?
Maybe it's a resonant state frequency, right? It's a resonant state. Resonant state, volume or a next, a level to the next reality.
like a puzzle.
How do you think that ties? How do you think, Sven, that ties into magic? Like the idea that consciousness itself is this intelligent fabric that all things are manifesting from. And do you think that magic itself would have come out of maybe the understanding of this stuff in the ancient world? Like where do these people get this idea of creating magic from? And is that, what's the relationship to you between, we're talking about what I think's happening now. And my opinion on it is that, like, we've lost some ancient knowledge of our relationship to these deeper fields. We've advanced in a lot of ways in this technological materialistic end, but what's happening now in this more quantum physics kind of reality is we're realizing, like Michio Kaku is coming out going, guys, like, Planck, Pauli, all these guys were saying, man, we can't find a bottom. This stuff has to be intelligent. This is beyond anything that science can touch. So I think we're having this kind of blend between the ancient world and the modern world, and we're meeting in the middle somewhere. And what I guess the biggest question is what's the relationship, or what is consciousness and magic have in common, or are they the same thing? And is magic an expression of something that's coming out of this consciousness field? I mean, what's the relationship in your mind between magic and, like, say, the unified field, or what physicists are calling this kind of matrix? And is there any relationship at all in your mind between this stuff?
Oh, I personally think that consciousness would come from some sort of unified field. And previously in history, we had this idea that things happened just randomly, action at a distance. And Einstein came along, and now we have Einsteinian reality, which is, space-time. And like you were saying, Michio Kaku coming out talking about the universe being intelligent, because there's really no empty space between anything. Like, it's filled with something.
Right.
Or we might have called it the ether, and that was debunked in history. But now we have things like the Higgs field, which in quantum physics is, a field that particles and atoms come from. So I feel like we've come full circle with a lot of these things. Modern science feels like a structure, and magic and esotericism would be the furnishings and things inside of it to me.
I like that. Beans in the broth.
Oh, that's a fucking beautiful way to say it. That's awesome. Yeah, it's really, really good,
well
man.
Put, Sven.
This is really good stuff. And this is kind of what I want to. This is a really good segue, because Manly P. Hall, who we all know, is one of the masters of the mysteries. Right? We've heard of him all the time, and I think that what he's talking about here is that the alchemist of our own emotional and psychological being, that magic is within us, in a sense that consciousness, we have control over our own unified consciousness, our own unique consciousness is within us. We are masters of our own life, and in so doing, we are like it's tiny gods, right? We control our own universes. And so where magic can come into play is understanding what are illusions within your own mind and how you're controlling these gears, just like a magician would for a crowd. And Manly P. Hall has a quote here saying that we can only escape from the world by outgrowing the world. Death may take man out of the world, but only wisdom can take the world out of the man. As long as the human being is obsessed by worldliness, he will suffer from the karmic consequences of false allegiances. When, however, worldliness is transmuted into spiritual integrity, alchemy is a word that I would use right there too.
Yep, but you're not making gold. You're not making gold.
No.
That's right. even though he's so right there on the so what Manly P. Hall was kind of saying is that we are our own alchemist, and what we're doing is we're taking psychic energy, we're taking psychic content that's arising within us, and we have to put them together like an alchemist would, or a chemist would today, and make something of that. So I think that magic has a play into that world. What do you think about that concept? Do you think that resonates with you?
Oh, definitely. And kind of circling back, I feel like a lot of people think that we're as a whole more intelligent and more read than we have been in previous ages, but we tend to push concepts like magic to the side wherever it'll fit. Magic, oh, that's just magic tricks and illusions and goofy stuff people do on stage. Alchemy, that was just a bunch of weird people trying to turn metals from one into gold, when it's neither of those things completely. It encompasses those things, but there's so many things between those two lines that you can learn, and yeah.
Well, yeah, alchemy was, you know, sort of the improvement of the man, you know, the improvement of the soul, you know, and everything you look at, you know, through Egypt, you see all these temples, you know, all these things that are shaped like the anatomy of man, or, you know, the form of man. And it's almost like they were trying to compel the structure to do something, you know, to.
Yeah, like the Leibniz. You're talking about Leibniz.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, like, you know, the Temple of Man and all that. You know, you look at it from the sky.
Yeah, the Temple of Man in Egypt. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really wild, you know, and yeah, that, you know, that's a form of magic too, I guess, is you actually are like taking a structure and putting life into it, you know, and some sort of power, you know, over, you know, whatever area that it's built in. You know, it's just gonna, you know, be there forever the way they built them. Another thing, you know, is, speaking of magic, you know, I mean, you know, we see ancient aliens and all this stuff, and yeah, we lifted the rocks with aliens and all, but really, how the hell did they do that? You know, I mean, it would be magic. We could show them a cell phone all day and go, haha, look at my iPhone, and they'd be like, yeah, look at that 70-ton rock over there, and my brother Marco's just pushing it right along, you know, like with one hand, you know. So yeah, I see it as, like you said, you know, we try to think that, you know, I sometimes think, oh, we're more intelligent now, and you know, that was a good point, that, you know, they were really in touch with a lot more things that were important back then that would look like magic to us. Yeah.
And speaking of the death of kind of what Sven was talking about, it actually happened in the Renaissance, where we went from this Renaissance humanism saw a resurgence of Hermeticism and other Neoplatonic varieties of ceremonial magic. But then what happened was the Industrial Revolution. And what happened was scientism started, and in such forms as substitution of chemistry for alchemy, the dethronement of the Ptolemaic theory of the universe assumed by astrology. So we went from astrology to astronomy, and then we went from the germ theory of disease that restricted the scope of applied magic and threatened the belief system it relied on. So tensions roused by the Protestant Reformation led to an upswing in witch hunting, and this is where this got started, because once they started getting scientific, they started looking at this stuff as superstition. So this ties into kind of the origin of superstition.
Can you imagine? I mean, being a witch, you know, or being called a witch, and you're just like, I just came out of my house one day, and like, you know, these people are dragging me down the road, and I mean, it's like, you know, it's just insane. You know, it's like
that
you know,
that's the key moment where we lost that connection. Right, is when we had this ancient form where there was probably a lot of truth in it, there was probably a lot of power in it, there was probably results in it, and we went from like, oh, let's look at the world as a materialistic form, and let's just take all the magic out of it. And that's one of the things that I used to say. I said, I want my unicorn back, right? Like, as a kid, you grow up with magic. Santa Claus is real. There's a magical guy flying in the sky. There's a magical bunny.
You got a rabbit foot.
Right, Jesus is magic, right? I mean, he can die and come back and do all these things. So you're raised to think all of these things, and magic is pretty alive. And then schools like, no. They're going to chop the horn off the unicorn, call it a horse, and tell you that it's not real. Sven, what do you think about the scientific reductionism that's happened in the past half a century, and what it's done to the idea of magic? And where does this fit in your ideas with, like, say, the New Age movement and this kind of resurgence of, you know, these ideas coming out, like, that are trying to push against this? And where, you know, what's going on with that? Where did science go wrong? What do you think about that?
I don't know if I would call science inherently wrong. It's definitely misguided since the turn of the century, I think. We've tried to divorce ourselves from anything spiritual and esoteric unless it fits in a very small guideline. And those small guidelines don't really seem to, you know, allow any kind of personal spiritual development of any kind. And to be honest, I feel like a lot of it is probably on the nefarious side. We covered black magic before, and I do think that there would be people who would, you know, not really like the idea of any group or large population of people having any kind of personal power to themselves, either for development or for affecting the things around themselves.
Well, we do know,
basically,
right, and we know that Hollywood. Well, Hollywood is the wood that magicians used to make their wands out of, right?
Yeah.
I mean, TV is an illusion, right? We sit in front of these boxes every day. We're fed these words, which are
it's
right.
called television programming for a reason.
Yeah,
that's
dude,
right.
Exactly.
That's
it's like tell lies, vision. It's right there.
And we've talked about looking behind a television set at the people watching it and what they look like. They look mesmerized, right? Which comes after the name Frank Mesmer, who was an illusionist, if I'm not mistaken. And so there's these big connections with our cell phones, social programming, Facebook, social media, television, and movies, and information in general. It's a way of kind of keeping us spellbound into these ideas and controlling us.
Well, speaking of Mesmer, have you ever dabbled in hypnosis, Sven?
I've wanted to, but I have just never taken the time to sit down and I've read a few books, but
what do you think about it? Is it real? I mean, is it pretty valid stuff? A lot of these
I definitely think so. People are a lot more suggestible than they want to realize or admit.
Yeah.
Oh, big time. I mean, I'm a victim, right? We've talked about this in the past. If you were under mind control, would you know it?
Yeah, Nikki said, I want a 4-carat ring instead of that wimpy little 2-carat thing you're whipping out. Make it so.
I really want to keep this PG, but I got about 5 rated R things to say about it.
We have a rated R section. Yeah, we can do some rated R stuff here, man.
Dave's like, screw it, say it, we'll edit it.
Put some death metal on in the background, man. Come on.
But yeah, I mean, that's why I think this is such a broad topic, because magic is something that, and illusions is something that we experience every day. We are under illusions every day. We're under illusions in a lot of different dimensions of our own beliefs, our own fears, our own ideas of ourselves, the ideas that others are putting upon us, the indoctrination systems that are around us, we were raised by, our parenting. I mean, corporate media. I mean, there's so many things that we're assaulted with.
Well, the music industry is one. Music industry is a massive tool. I mean, to brainwash and to instill ideas into society. And if you look at the genres of music, through the last, like, say, 70 years, they've been really engineered. They're not just like natural genres that formed and they were morphed into things and hybridized and split off. And for me, that's what I wanted to ask Sven. I mean, when you're thinking of magic, and I mean, do you automatically think of like heavy metal, or I mean, right, because of the lyrics and the style and the genre and all that? I mean, because it's so, like Rush used to write all these magical and whimsical lyrics, that were cool. I mean, so what inspiration has different types of music been for you to the entertainment that you do, picking out your act and your what you're going to do that night? Is music a big part of that, like what you've listened to, and you incorporate it?
Oh yeah, there's definitely a lot of musical influence. Some of my best material has come from just me sitting in front of a mirror with a candle, blaring doom metal, and
awesome.
how it looks like.
That's great, man.
Because I know sitting there, I get super in the zone. It's candlelight. All I can really see are my face and my hands. And I know if I can do something in the mirror that gets me, that it's going to be, good enough for someone else to see.
Yeah, that's badass. And in the background, if you got new metal playing, that's okay. They're just going to have to deal with it. Yeah, whoa.
Yeah, I do play some in the show.
Yeah, I think that's great.
That's amazing, man.
Because that's, for me, that's where
that's a good
younger music, really. Like when I heard Rush when I was just a kid, and Kansas and all these bands singing about magic and sing, like Dungeons and Dragons was out then, and that's all we had. We played. And dude, I don't care. Anybody would be like, I want to be this and that. I'm like, I want to be a wizard, because I want everything to be random. I want to have to roll the dice with every step I take. And but I also want to be a wizard with a 20 strength and be able to kick the shit out of somebody. And that was my ultimate goal, was to become a like a huge muscular wizard, like Josh right there.
It's funny.
Man, I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try to keep this body, but I'm gonna get old like Gandalf. You know what I mean?
It is magic.
I thought you brought something up that I think that you brought up something that's interesting.
Your whole body
Sven,
when we do this, so we don't have to look at it.
well, if it helps, I don't have any pants or underwear.
Oh, okay.
I don't have any pants or underwear on either. But I always do the show with no pants on. By the way, I was saying that I think that one of the first things, I think the very first thing that humans thought was magic that they probably saw
Fire.
was one of two things. Probably the stars first.
Yeah.
The stars were probably first. The sun, the stars, the planets. But I'd probably say fire would be second. And I would say that third was reflection, because mirrors in themselves are magical, right? Like, what is a reflective surface is very magical. It's something like a still lake, where the first kind of like early hominid would look over and see themselves and get scared, much like animals do today. Like they look and they freak out. Like, what is that? That even to a low form, like a dog or a chimp or something like that, that would be very magical to them. They don't understand it. It's like an illusion existing. How is this possible? I think this is where it probably began in human consciousness as we developed early on, 250,000 years ago, where we were kind of looking at fire and looking at celestial bodies and looking at maybe reflective surfaces and even learning how to create them.
You need to remember, though, mirrors don't reflect images. They trap them. They reflect light.
Interesting. Please continue.
No, that's just basically all I have to say. Move on.
What do you think about that, Sven? Like the power of a mirror, the power of reflection, the power of.
That's a great question.
Because you guys use that a lot. You guys use that a lot in your shows, and you're just talking about how it actually captivates you as the artist that's doing the actual art. So how does that work?
Oh yeah, it's all smoke and mirrors. No,
I like the smoke part.
There's definitely that quality to mirrors. I hadn't heard the capture an image, but that makes sense to me now. You definitely have to have light to reflect to see anything in a mirror.
Yeah. Well, I've thought about light a lot, so it was a natural question for me.
I meditate and do, I guess, psychic work with mirrors. I feel like when I can just zone out and stare into one, I can definitely get into those deeper places into my mind. It's led me to want to experiment with black mirrors. I've heard of divining techniques with those.
What is a black mirror?
What is that?
It's a mirror usually made out of obsidian. It's completely black, and it's, I guess, the opposite of what a crystal ball would be for divining or fortune telling.
Is that like an Aztec thing or something with the obsidian? I mean, or
I don't know if it's Aztec or not.
Or ancient people. I mean, because obsidian.
But that's kind of what I would think to be the first crystal that they would work with.
Yeah,
to get that reflective surface, right? Because glass is kind of complicated.
Yeah,
and obsidian would probably be.
Look, is that what it does? I mean, it gives you a different look when you look into it, or I've never tried one.
Anytime I've used reflective stuff for like any kind of divination, I feel like it's not what you see in the object itself. It's you focusing on something like that allows you to see it in your consciousness, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that makes total sense. Because
it's more of it's a
form of light that you're seeing, or it traps your image in there, but it's other things that escape back out of it are gone. The lighting around you. So
you're saying it's more like it's a mirror of your mind.
Yeah, a mirror of
more than your face.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? It's more of the mirror.
It's the mirror reflecting you physically, but as it's reflecting physically, I feel like there's a trance state you can enter, which is, my technique personally, and it allows you to, see more than the physical.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah,
that's amazing.
Jeff Hall's that way. He always talks about he's like, man, I swear to God, when I meditate, I would see these things that I just called archons, and that was the name he settled on. But he's like, I was in the hospital and I was just like kind of half asleep and sitting there, and they were just around me, just walking around, and it was like the weirdest thing, he said. And I remember I was out in the woods in Tennessee, and we had dogs coming at us in the woods. We were hanging out at this old abandoned house getting drunk, and we heard these dogs coming, and so we all freaked out and jumped in the car. And the dogs were jumping on the car, shaking the car and barking, but we're looking outside the windows of the car, and there's no dogs, there's nothing. Mm-hmm. And we're all like, what the hell, man? But it was like, if you really stopped and looked, like I did, I was kind of freaked out, but I just stopped and I just stared out the window, and you could see something moving, like the Predator, how the Predator is, there's a little wave background. And it was like, I'm thinking, am I just really drunk and just not seeing these dogs? And everybody else had the same experience, and we never talked about it much after that, but it was really freaking weird. And I said, and that's when I started believing in, dimensions and light, and I started reading about light when I was in my 20s, trying to understand it, and the fact that it doesn't travel, it's always there.
Yep.
It's just the spectrum is going to be different, and something could be going on in your lap and you don't even know it. If that light doesn't create a physical body that's in your lap that you can feel, or it burns you or freezes you, it could be there and nothing happens, it could move through you, it's just, and that's where light comes in, and I would say probably the most magical thing I can imagine in the universe is light. Electricity is pretty cool, but I think light's got that one hands down.
Well, I think we're gonna discover that electricity and light are probably the same thing.
It might just be different portions of, like they say they are frequencies of energy or whatever. But it's
a package deal. If you're gonna have some light, you're probably gonna have some electromagnetism or something that's gonna come with that. And that's kind of the battery of the universe, right? Light and electricity.
What?
And so
what?
What? But
sorry,
Dave's just here for comic relief, Sven.
Yeah, that's all I am. What is it? NFL Tonight? Yeah, the guy threw the football. The guy caught it.
We don't do laughing, Dave. We just do doom metal and darkness. That's all we do. Okay, there's no laughing.
You come look at my CD spinner, and you'll be like, dude, yeah.
You want to kill a rabbit? You want to kill a rabbit? I'll laugh. Okay, you kill a rabbit, and then I'll probably laugh a little bit.
As long as you eat it, you have to eat it. You can't just kill it and leave it there. You got to eat it.
But that's where all this stuff is a blend, right? Where we talk about what magic is, just kind of almost everything. I think that consciousness is magic. Magic is just something that we don't understand. And it's also realms of reality we have yet to even know, and we probably visit them in our dreams. I think dream could be the same state as a post-mortem reality. Maybe we're going to where we're going to die every night when we sleep.
That long one, yeah. Now, I will say the eye is a black mirror. Think of that, Sven.
Yeah, I like that.
That just came to me because it is. The eye is a black mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's why the double slit experiment doesn't work the way they want it to when someone's observing it. Maybe it's a black mirror, that has to maybe the light reacts to different surfaces or different things like that, like a dichroic lens.
Mm.
Right.
Anyways, I had to get that out. Sorry, guys.
No, that's great.
I didn't want to forget it.
I thought this quote was interesting because we talked about white and black magicians. And we talked about kind of also what alchemy means for the personal self. Yeah, and I think Manly P. Hall's idea of magic is something it's personally alchemical. And I think what's interesting about this whole move from alchemy to chemistry is that we don't realize is that the actual mental alchemy that we use affects the chemistry. So like when you perceive reality and you decode your own consciousness and your own will's desires, you try to understand who you are, right? You try to actually define yourself and what consciousness is within you. you begin to learn that there are laws, natural laws, and there are systems that you can master that will make you a greater individual and a more spiritual being. I think that's where alchemy really lies, is in the self. Because if you weren't conscious to see anything, would anything exist, right?
Well, that's what monks do. Monks are just basically silent, and they meditate and they absorb and they get downloads, and they may get it and they may look at it and understand it, but they're not going to share it with the world. They're just going to stay where they're at and keep meditating. And I think that's what it is it's basically a comb that goes through the chaotic information and straightens it out, and kind of takes it and makes it easier to digest, in pieces, in segments. It kind of and I think that's what's going to be the most important thing, is people understand that in the future.
And I want people to understand. Sven, what do you think about, you read this quote, right? The white magician consecrates his life to study, meditation, and service, that he may know the law and that he may direct force to its appointed ends. What does he mean by know the law?
No, like you were saying, the natural laws, the universal order, things don't just happen randomly. That's not logical at all to assume, is that we live in a chaotic universe where things just happen for no reason. And I think having a life dedicated to learning why do these things work? We have a rough concept of how they work, but not why. And that seems to be my focus lately, is kind of breaking things down on the subatomic level in conjunction with the more esoteric and magical levels.
That's exactly what I believe too. That's what he's trying to say. He's saying that he mods himself to the plan, right? So he stops changing the flow. He starts flowing with the change, right? He starts he stops resisting. He starts understanding laws, and he observes that he can use a lot less force. He could just allow things to happen, and by doing so, he becomes part of the divine rhythm by sacrificing himself to that flow, and his wish is the will of the infinite, asking only to know wherein his duty lies, right? Not do I need to know all things. I need to know what I need to know so that I can become the best me that I choose to become, that is also in connection with this natural law. So that's what he's saying, how he may be of greatest service to the greatest number. And that would be the white magician. The white magician is there to better himself so he can better the world. This is where Manly P. Hall's talks.
Message is what he's doing. Yeah.
Right. And so this is where I think magic is something that people needs to understand, that this is a simple, and I can give people a concrete example. My wife is a dental hygienist. She's also a realtor. And when she's in a dark place, when she's in a place of darkness and like let's say that she's feels depression, or she's not happy, something's happening in her life, nothing happens productively in the outside. Everything kind of goes into sleep mode. She's not getting any kind of leads. She's not socializing. Things kind of dim. Mm-hmm. When she then translates her reality into something positive and starts to think, I can do this and I can do that, and she starts to basically become the alchemist and turn experience into something positive instead of something negative, all of a sudden she attracts all of these things to her. She gets people that call her. She gets leads from nowhere. All of a sudden things start to happen. So where this Manly P. Hall is trying to say here, and where it ties to maybe magic in life, is that when we start to work within ourselves and look to the positive, we start to attract things, and where we used to think is distance becomes an instant reality. We immediately experience a reaction from the universe, from our own state of being. What do you think about that, Sven?
I definitely think alchemy is an internal transmutation. At the time period, a lot of these texts were being translated or written. It had to be written allegorically because, like we mentioned, witch burnings, or during the Dark Ages in Europe.
Anybody burned.
Yeah, anybody. If you're doing something weird and outside of the norm. Yeah. What was I thinking?
You're talking about working on the inner self. That's where magic kind of is.
Yeah. Inner self. doing the inner work is what's most important. Every esoteric like culture that I've researched basically says the same thing at the end of the rabbit hole is everything is one and everything is all connected, and that a lot of what we perceive as reality is the illusion.
Like the end of the rabbit hole is the beginning.
Yeah. Magic was the rabbit hole for all of this for me.
Yeah, the hole was the magic. Yeah.
Yep. Right. So to that is a really good way for, I think, people to understand that magic is not something that is going to see a show and have an illusionist that is those things, but it's also within you, and it's the way that you are able to take experience and transmute that as an alchemist, as an interim alchemist, into the life that you want to see in front of you. We actually have those abilities, and I think that it's closer than people think. Joseph Campbell has a saying that in life, when you come to a great chasm, jump. It's not as wide as you think. And I think that's where he's talking about. You have this illusion that things are further from you than are possible. And so you get fear and doubt and all these things come in. But as an alchemist, you have to realize that these forces are illusions, and to overcome them is the challenge. And when you make that jump, you will actually land, and you will realize that it wasn't as wide as you think. So I think that's a really good kind of way for people to understand that magic is something a little more personal than they realize. So that's awesome. Sven, this has been an awesome show. Is there anything else that you want people to know about magic? What is your last kind of comments on what you feel like people should get from magic, and maybe how to interest people that where can people go to learn more about it in a way that will bring them up to speed very quickly?
Come to one of my shows. Yeah, I would say online is a really good resource for anything. All of our knowledge that we have, almost so far, has been put online. YouTube has a lot of stuff on it. I would suggest keeping an open mind to anything. Like, don't know until you actually know. Always be on the lookout for something new to learn, because there's always going to be something new to learn that you didn't know before, and it might not fit into, the paradigm that you think is reality. Always be open and always be ready to listen.
Yeah.
Great. And that's perfect advice, man.
And you're in Austin, Texas, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So where can they find you? They can find you on Instagram and Facebook?
Yeah, check me out on Instagram and Facebook, Captain Sven Blackheart. I should have some show dates dropping here soon, so you guys can come out and check me live. I'd love to come back on with you guys in the future. This has been fun.
Hey, yeah, you're gonna a lot of talking to do. We got some big topics that we discuss every day on the discussion group that I'm sure we'll be looking forward to discussing it at length.
That's right. If you guys actually want to have a personal discussion with Sven, you go to Ancient Amnesia discussion group. He's an admin of the page. He's brilliant, and he will jump in on anything you post. And he's got a lot. I've learned a lot from him since I've met him. I mean, it's been the moment that him and I met, it was an instant connection, and we're like brothers now. I mean, gosh, it feels like we've known each other for years. But we really hope you guys enjoyed the show. Sven's going to be our regular magician on the show. He's going to come back and teach us more about the arts, and we have so much more to cover. Please communicate with us. Let us know what you want to ask Sven, so we can have some things to ask him. Dave, do you have any final comments on anything?
Yeah, I just want to thanks, Sven, for being here, man. I know this is we're fairly new at this, and we appreciate you coming here and sharing your experiences and your knowledge and everything. And really nice to meet you, man. I want to say that I'm a lot of respect for you, brother. And my saying is I always seek the unique, man. And you are a hell of a smart guy. You're a unique individual. And thanks for being here.
Yeah, man, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, dude.
Yeah, exactly. Guys, go to ancientamnesia.com. You can find archived articles and podcasts. We will try to keep that updated as much as possible. Stay tuned on Ancient Amnesia Facebook, where we post multiple articles a day, trying to keep you updated on archaeo news, science news, everything from philosophy to geology and anything in between. So you can also please join our discussion group where you can communicate with Sven and Dave and I and others of like mind and interests. Yeah, right. Be careful what you ask. Be careful what you say.
Yeah.
No, but all ideas are welcome, and we want people to gather and learn from each other.
No one will be ridiculed. No one will be made fun of. You'll be instantly assimilated into our group of knowledgeable people that we use to build our own ideologies.
Yeah, we're secretly starting an army. So, but please.
Why do you have to tell them every time, Josh? Now we got to start over somewhere else. Okay.
So anyway, stay tuned. We're going to be back for more. So thanks, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers.